Korvac's blood-stained claws scrabbled at the twisted metal of her spacecraft, her reptilian body screaming in pain as she fought to escape the wreckage. The toxic atmosphere of the uncharted planet burned her lungs, and distant howls of alien predators echoed across the desolate landscape. Her mission as a Gorn scout had ended in disaster, her ship brought down by rival forces in a fierce battle above this hostile world. As consciousness faded, Korvac's eyes fixed on an approaching figure. Humanoid, encased in a protective suit, the creature moved with purpose towards her. Her warrior instincts screamed danger, but her battered body refused to respond. The last thing she saw before blackness took her was a pair of determined human eyes peering through a visor. Johnny Reed, exobiologist and sole inhabitant of Research Outpost 7, stood frozen in shock. His sensors had detected the crash, and curiosity had driven him to investigate despite strict non-interference protocols. Now, faced with a critically injured alien life form, those protocols seemed meaningless. The reptilian creature before him was clearly sapient and clearly dying. Without hesitation, Johnny sprang into action. He carefully extracted the alien from the wreckage, mindful of her injuries. Her scales were cool and smooth under his gloved hands, so different from human skin. As he loaded her into his all-terrain vehicle, Johnny's mind raced. His outpost wasn't equipped for xenobiological medical care, but he couldn't just let her die. The journey back to the outpost was tense, Johnny constantly checking on his unconscious passenger. Once inside, he began the painstaking process of adapting his limited medical equipment to Gorn physiology. Hours passed as he worked tirelessly, using every scrap of his exobiological knowledge to stabilize her condition. When the alien finally regained consciousness, her reaction was immediate and violent. A clawed hand lashed out, nearly shredding Johnny's protective suit. He stumbled backward, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "Easy," he said, knowing she couldn't understand but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. "I'm trying to help you." Over the next few days, as the Gorn's health improved, a tentative trust began to form. Through a combination of gestures and improvised drawings, Johnny learned her name was Korvac. She, in turn, began to share details of the interstellar conflict that had brought her to this world. Johnny's blood ran cold as he pieced together the full picture. The Gorn were at war with several alien races, including humans from Earth's distant colonies. Korvac, loyal soldier that she was, had been on a scouting mission when she was shot down. By saving her, Johnny had unwittingly inserted himself into a conflict that spanned galaxies. As he processed this information, Johnny's communications array crackled to life. Both human and alien forces had detected Korvac's crash and were converging on the planet. Soon, his remote outpost would become the center of a political and military storm. Johnny looked at Korvac, seeing not an enemy, but a living being he had saved. Whatever came next, he knew his life, and possibly the course of the war, had been irrevocably changed by his decision to help an injured alien lost on a hostile world. Johnny's eyes darted between the communications array and Korvac, his mind racing. The alien scales shimmered in the artificial light of the outpost as she tilted her head, sensing his unease. "Trouble?" Korvac asked, her voice a low hiss punctuated by clicks. Johnny nodded, amazed at how quickly they'd developed a rudimentary form of communication. "Ship's coming, human and Gorn." Korvac's eyes widened, her tail lashing anxiously. Johnny approached her slowly, hands open. "I won't let them hurt you," he said, pointing to himself and then to her. Over the next hours, Johnny's small research outpost became a flurry of activity. He meticulously copied his research data, knowing the approaching forces might confiscate or destroy his work. All the while, he kept glancing at Korvac, noting how she watched him with a mixture of curiosity and growing trust. As they worked side by side, Korvac began to share more about her people. She traced intricate patterns on a datapad, explaining the complex social structures of Gorn society. Johnny listened, enraptured, his scientist mind cataloging every detail. "Why fight humans?" Johnny asked, gesturing to the stars. Korvac's expression darkened. She drew a series of planets, then violently scribbled over several. "Humans take, Gorn protect." Johnny frowned, realizing the conflict was more complex than either side likely understood. He opened his mouth to ask another question when a shrill alarm cut through the air. The outpost's early warning system flashed red. A ship had entered orbit. Johnny's heart raced as he checked the monitors. The approaching vessel was unmistakably human in design. He turned to Korvac, seeing fear in her reptilian eyes. "Hide," he said, pointing to a hatch on the floor. "Safe." Korvac hesitated, her clawed hand gripping Johnny's arm. For a moment, he thought she might refuse. Then, with a nod, she slipped into the underground chamber. Johnny sealed the hatch, praying it would be enough. He had barely straightened up when the outpost's external cameras showed a shuttle touching down nearby. Armored figures emerged, weapons at the ready. Johnny took a deep breath and stepped outside to meet them. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, their suits gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Johnny raised his hands, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "I'm Dr. Johnny Reed, exobiologist," he called out. "This is a research outpost. There's no need for weapons." The lead soldier, his visor obscuring his face, barked out orders. "Secure the perimeter. Dr. Reed, you're to be detained for questioning." Before Johnny could protest, he was grabbed and his hands were bound behind his back. He watched helplessly as the soldiers entered his outpost, their boots leaving muddy tracks on the floor. Inside, the soldiers moved methodically, rifling through Johnny's equipment and data storage. One of them held up a vial of Korvac's blood, its green hue unmistakable. "Sir, we've got evidence of Gorn presence," the soldier called out. The lead soldier, who had introduced himself as Lieutenant Cooper, strode over to Johnny. "Explain this, Doctor. Now." Johnny's mind raced. He knew he had to choose his words carefully. "I'm an exobiologist. My job is to study alien life forms. When I found an injured sentient being, I couldn't just let it die." Cooper's eyes narrowed behind his visor. "You aided an enemy combatant, Doctor. That's treason." "She's not an enemy," Johnny argued, his voice rising. "She's a living, thinking being. This could be our chance for real communication, for understanding. We could end this war." Cooper snorted. "Naive fool. Do you have any idea how many human lives the Gorn have taken?" As they argued, another soldier approached with Johnny's research logs. "Sir, you need to see this. Detailed Gorn physiology, behavior patterns, even some language." Cooper's posture shifted, interest overriding his initial hostility. "This could be valuable intel." He turned back to Johnny. "Where is the Gorn now, Doctor?" Johnny's mouth went dry. He could feel sweat beating on his forehead. "Gone," he lied. "Left days ago. I have no idea where." Cooper studied him for a long moment, clearly unconvinced. He opened his mouth to speak when his comm unit crackled to life. "Ground team, this is Captain Steele. We're picking up multiple Gorn signatures approaching the system. Prepare for immediate extraction. Bring the doctor and all relevant data." The soldiers burst into action, gathering equipment and research materials. Johnny stood rooted to the spot, his mind whirling. If he left now, Korvac would be alone on this hostile world. Or worse, captured by her own people and punished as a traitor for the information she'd shared. As a soldier grabbed his arm to lead him out, Johnny made a split-second decision. He stumbled, falling against a console. His bound hands found a hidden switch, triggering a localized electromagnetic pulse. The outpost's lights flickered and died. In the confusion, Johnny slipped away from his captors. He had seconds at most before the backup systems kicked in. He raced to the hidden hatch, his heart pounding. As he reached for the release mechanism, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. Johnny turned, coming face to face with Lieutenant Cooper's stern visage. "Going somewhere, Doctor?" In the dim emergency lighting, Johnny could see the soldiers regrouping, weapons trained on him. Below his feet, he imagined he could hear Korvac's anxious breathing. Time seemed to stand still as Johnny weighed his options. The fate of two species might well rest on what he did next. Johnny's heart raced as he stared into Cooper's stern eyes. The lieutenant's grip on his shoulder tightened, and Johnny could feel the tension radiating from the soldiers surrounding them. In that moment, he knew he had to act. With a sudden burst of strength, Johnny twisted away from Cooper's grasp. His hand found the hidden switch on the console and he slammed it down. The outpost plunged into darkness as the electromagnetic pulse surged through the systems. Shouts of confusion filled the air as Johnny stumbled towards the hidden hatch. His fingers fumbled with the release mechanism, adrenaline making his movements clumsy. Finally, the hatch swung open. "Korvac," he whispered urgently into the darkness below. "We have to go. Now." The Gorn's scales scraped against metal as she emerged from her hiding place. Johnny grabbed her clawed hand, pulling her up. "Human soldiers," he explained hurriedly, gesturing towards the chaos around them. "Bad situation. Must leave." Korvac's eyes darted around the dimly lit room, taking in the armed figures stumbling about. She hissed softly, her body tensing for a fight. "No," Johnny said firmly, placing a hand on her arm. "No fight, talk. Understand?" For a moment, Korvac hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. The backup systems kicked in, flooding the outpost with harsh emergency lighting. Johnny blinked, momentarily disoriented. When his vision cleared, he found himself face to face with Lieutenant Cooper and his team, their weapons trained on Korvac. "Step away from the alien, Doctor," Cooper ordered, his voice tight with anger and fear. Johnny raised his hands, placing himself between Korvac and the soldiers. "Wait," he pleaded. "Just wait. She's not a threat. She can help us." Cooper's eyes narrowed. "Help us? That thing is the enemy, Doctor. It's killed countless humans." "She," Johnny corrected, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "And yes, she can help. Think about it, Lieutenant. We have a chance here for real communication, real understanding. This could be the key to ending the war." A tense silence fell over the room. Johnny could feel Korvac's presence behind him, her breathing quick but controlled. He prayed she would remain calm, that she understood enough to know he was trying to protect her. Cooper's comm unit crackled to life, breaking the standoff. "Ground team, this is Captain Steele. Multiple Gorn signatures approaching. Prepare for immediate extraction." The lieutenant's eyes hardened as he weighed his options. His eyes darted between Johnny, Korvac, and the valuable research scattered around the outpost. "Sir," one of the soldiers spoke up, "the intel we've gathered here, it could be invaluable. And if the doctor's right about communication—" Cooper held up a hand, silencing him. He stared at Johnny for a long moment before speaking. "You vouch for this, for her?" Johnny nodded emphatically. "I do. She's not just a soldier, Lieutenant. She's a living, thinking being, and she's chosen to trust me, to share information about her people. That has to mean something." The seconds ticked by, each feeling like an eternity. Finally, Cooper lowered his weapon. "Fine, the alien comes with us. But if this goes south, it's on your head, Doctor." Relief washed over Johnny. He turned to Korvac, speaking slowly and clearly. "We go with them, to human ship. Safe. Okay?" Korvac's eyes darted between Johnny and the soldiers. Her tail lashed nervously, but she nodded her understanding. The evacuation was a blur of activity. Soldiers rushed to gather equipment and data storage devices. Johnny worked alongside them, ensuring the most critical research was secured. All the while, he kept Korvac close, acting as a buffer between her and the wary humans. As they emerged from the outpost, the roar of engines filled the air. A sleek scout ship descended from the clouds, kicking up dust and debris. The boarding ramp lowered, and Captain Steele's voice boomed from the ship's speakers. "Move it, people! We've got incoming!" Johnny helped Korvac up the ramp, keenly aware of the soldiers' eyes on them. Inside the ship, crew members stopped and stared, some reaching for weapons at the sight of the Gorn. "At ease," Cooper barked, pushing past them. "The alien's with us. Captain's orders." As the ship lifted off, Johnny guided Korvac to a seat, helping her strap in. The Gorn's scales glistened with sweat. Her breathing labored. Johnny frowned, noticing for the first time how pale her usually vibrant coloration had become. "Are you all right?" he asked, miming discomfort. Korvac shook her head weakly, her clawed hand clutching at her side where she'd been injured in the crash. A woman in a medical uniform approached, her eyes wide as she took in Korvac's alien form. "I'm Dr. Elena Reyes," she introduced herself to Johnny. What's wrong with her? Johnny quickly explained Korvac's injuries and the treatments he'd administered at the outpost. I'm not sure how the change in environment is affecting her, he admitted, and I don't know if your medical supplies will be compatible with Gorn physiology. Dr. Reyes nodded thoughtfully. We'll have to improvise. Come on, let's get her to the medbay. As they made their way through the ship, Johnny could feel the tension in the air. Crew members pressed themselves against walls to avoid touching Korvac, their expressions a mix of fear and fascination. In the medbay, Dr. Reyes and Johnny worked side by side, adapting human medical equipment to treat a Gorn patient. It was a delicate dance of educated guesses and careful monitoring. Johnny found himself impressed by Reyes's quick thinking and steady hands. Hours passed as they stabilized Korvac's condition. Johnny's head swam with exhaustion, but a sense of accomplishment kept him going. They'd done it. They'd saved her. A commotion outside the medbay drew their attention. Captain Steele burst in, his face grim. Dr. Reed, we need to talk. Now! Johnny followed the captain to the bridge, leaving Korvac in Dr. Reyes's capable hands. The view screen showed a terrifying sight, a massive Gorn battle fleet closing in fast. They're after her, aren't they? Johnny asked, his mouth dry. Steele nodded. Looks that way, and they're willing to start a war to get her back. He turned to Johnny, his expression hard. So, Doctor, you're the Gorn expert now. What do we do? Johnny stared at the approaching fleet, his mind racing. Everything he'd learned about Korvac, about the Gorn, about this conflict, it all came down to this moment. We need to talk to them, he said finally. Open a channel. Let me speak to them. Steele raised an eyebrow. You're proposing we negotiate with them? Johnny met the captain's gaze steadily. Yes, it's our only chance to prevent an all-out war. And Captain, I think I know how to do it. As Steele considered Johnny's words, the ship's alarms blared. The Gorn fleet had entered weapons range. Time was running out, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. Balance. Johnny took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. Open a channel, Captain Steele ordered, his voice tight with tension. As the communications officer worked, Johnny turned to the captain. Sir, I need Korvac here. She can translate, help us communicate effectively. Steele's lips pursed, but he nodded. Get the Gorn up here, he barked into his comm unit. Moments later, Korvac arrived, supported by Dr. Reyes. The Gorn's scales had a sickly pallor, but her eyes were alert and focused. Korvac, Johnny said, speaking slowly and clearly, we need your help. Talk to your people. Tell them we want peace. The Gorn nodded, her clawed hand gripping Johnny's arm for support as she faced the view screen. The channel crackled to life, revealing the face of a Gorn commander. His scales were darker than Korvac's, marked with scars of battle. He hissed something in his native tongue, his eyes widening at the sight of Korvac. Korvac responded, her voice a series of clicks and guttural sounds. The exchange continued for several tense minutes, the bridge crew watching in nervous silence. Finally, Korvac turned to Johnny. They listen, she said haltingly in English. I tell them, I am Korvac, diplomat, secret mission for peace. The revelation hit the bridge like a shockwave. Captain Steele's eyebrows shot up and murmurs rippled through the crew. You're a diplomat? Johnny asked, stunned. Why didn't you tell me? Korvac's eyes met his, filled with a mix of fear and hope. Not safe, not know who trust, but now, must trust, for peace. Captain Steele stepped forward. Tell them we're willing to talk. We're heading to Epsilon 9 space station. They can send a delegation there. As Korvac relayed the message, the scout ship changed course, making for the massive human space station visible in the distance. The Gorn fleet maintained their position but did not advance. Upon docking at Epsilon 9, they were met by a contingent of armed guards, led by a tall, imposing man with steel-gray hair and a face etched with the lines of countless battles. Admiral Viktor Volkov, he introduced himself, his voice a low rumble. His eyes locked onto Korvac. So this is our guest. Sir, Captain Steele saluted, the situation has developed in unexpected ways. We need to debrief immediately. Volkov nodded curtly. Follow me. They made their way through the bustling station, drawing stares and whispers from the crew. Johnny stayed close to Korvac, acutely aware of the hostile glances thrown their way. In a secure conference room, Korvac began to explain her mission, with Johnny helping to translate. She spoke of a clandestine peace initiative, of her journey to meet with human diplomats, and of the attack that had derailed her mission. It was not humans, Korvac said, her voice strained. Not Gorn, Third Race, Zarkol. They want war continue. Admiral Volkov leaned forward, his brow furrowed. The Zarkol? We've had skirmishes with them, but nothing major. Why would they want to prolong our war with the Gorn? They profit, Korvac explained. Sell weapons, take territory while we fight, grow stronger. The implications of this revelation hung heavy in the air. Captain Steele shook his head in disbelief. All this time, we've been playing into their hands. Admiral Volkov stood pacing the room. This changes everything. If what you're saying is true, we need to reassess our entire strategy. He turned to Johnny. Dr. Reed, I'm authorizing you to continue working with Korvac. We need to know everything she knows. A young woman with short black hair and sharp features stepped forward. Sir, if I may, I'd like to assist Dr. Reed and Korvac in developing a peace proposal. Volkov nodded. Good thinking, Lieutenant Chen. Get on it. As they left the conference room, a commotion erupted in the corridor. A tall, muscular man with a scarred face pushed through the crowd, his eyes blazing with fury as they landed on Korvac. What the hell is this? He snarled. We're letting Gorn walk freely on our station now? Stand down, Major Kane, Volkov ordered. The situation is more complex than you realize. Kane's hand hovered near his sidearm. With all due respect, sir, the only good Gorn is a dead Gorn. Johnny stepped between Kane and Korvac, his heart racing. Major, please. She's here to help us end this war. The tension was broken by Dr. Reyes rushing up to them, her face pale. Korvac's condition is deteriorating, she reported. I've identified a treatment, but the medication is rare. It's only found on Novus 3. Johnny's stomach dropped. Novus 3 was a contested planet, a battleground between human and Gorn forces. Admiral Volkov frowned. We can't risk a full-scale mission for one alien, no matter how important. I'll go, Johnny volunteered without hesitation. Send me with a small team. We can slip in, get the medication, and get out. Volkov considered for a moment, then nodded. All right, Dr. Reed, but you'll need combat support. His eyes landed on Major Kane. Major, you'll lead the mission. Kane's eyes hardened, but he nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. As preparations for the mission began, Johnny found himself alone with Korvac in the makeshift medical bay. The Gorn's breathing was labored, her scales dull. Johnny, she said softly, why you help me? Your people hate Gorn. Johnny took her clawed hand in his. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I believe in peace. And because... He hesitated, realizing the truth of his next words, even as he spoke them. I care about you, Korvac. Korvac's eyes met his, filled with an emotion Johnny couldn't quite name. She squeezed his hand gently. I care too, she whispered. For peace. For you. The moment was interrupted by Lieutenant Chen entering with a data pad. Dr. Reed, we need to go over the mission parameters. As Johnny reluctantly pulled away from Korvac, he was unaware of the figure watching from the shadows. In a hidden corner of the station, a Zarkol spy activated a secure transmitter, relaying the details of the upcoming mission to his superiors. On the bridge of a cloaked Zarkol warship, a commander smiled coldly as he received the transmission. Prepare the assault teams, he ordered. We have a peace mission to sabotage. The shuttle's engines roared to life as Johnny strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat beside Major Kane. The rest of their small team, 2 seasoned soldiers and a medical officer, secured themselves in the rear compartment. Last chance to back out, Doc, Kane said, his scarred face impassive as he ran through pre-flight checks. Johnny shook his head. Not a chance. Korvac needs that medication. Kane grunted, but Johnny caught a flicker of grudging respect in the man's eyes. The shuttle lifted off smoothly, slipping out of Epsilon 9's docking bay and into the vast expanse of space. For hours, they traveled in tense silence. Johnny's mind raced with thoughts of Korvac, her condition worsening back on the station. He was so lost in his worries that he almost missed Kane's sudden intake of breath. "Multiple contacts," Kane barked, his hands flying over the controls, decloaking all around us. Johnny's heart sank as he saw the ships materialize on the display. Their sleek, predatory shapes were unmistakable. Zarkol attack vessels. How did they know? Johnny wondered aloud, gripping his seat as Kane threw the shuttle into a sharp, evasive maneuver. "Doesn't matter now," Kane growled. "Buckle up, it's going to get rough." The shuttle danced through space, Kane's expert piloting keeping them just ahead of the Zarkol's weapon locks. But with each passing second, their options dwindled. "We need to talk to them," Johnny insisted, reaching for the comms panel. Kane knocked his hand away. "Are you insane? They're trying to kill us." "We don't know that for certain," Johnny argued. "Let me try." Before Kane could object further, Johnny activated the shuttle's communications array. "Zarkol vessels, this is Dr. Jonathan Reed of the Human-Gorn Peace Delegation. We are on a humanitarian mission. Please respond." Silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the beeping of proximity alarms. Then, without warning, the nearest Zarkol ship opened fire. "There's your answer," Kane snarled, jerking the controls hard to port. The shuttle shuddered as energy beams grazed its hull. Johnny's stomach lurched as Kane pushed the engines beyond their limits, weaving through the barrage of enemy fire. But even Kane's considerable skills weren't enough. A direct hit rocked the shuttle, alarms blaring as systems failed. "We're losing engine power," Kane reported, his voice tight with strain. "Bardelsky, reroute emergency power to the shields." As the team in the back scrambled to comply, Johnny stared at the view screen in disbelief. A massive shape was materializing out of the darkness of space, a Gorn battlecruiser. "Are they here to finish us off?" Kane muttered, preparing for the worst. But to their amazement, the Gorn ship opened fire on the Zarkol vessels. Its powerful weapons tore through the smaller ships, scattering them like leaves in a storm. A transmission crackled through their comms. "Human vessel, this is General Sleeth of the Gorn Imperium. We will cover your descent to the planet's surface. Make haste." Johnny's eyes widened. "Sleeth, that's Korvac's father." Kane didn't waste time questioning their good fortune. With expert precision, he guided the damaged shuttle towards Novus III, the Gorn battlecruiser providing cover fire against the regrouping Zarkol forces. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, the shuttle bucked and shuddered. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Kane's face was a mask of concentration as he fought to keep them from burning up on entry. "Brace for impact," Kane shouted as the ground rushed up to meet them. The shuttle hit hard, skidding across the alien landscape before coming to rest in a tangle of strange, purple-leaf vegetation. For a moment, everything was still. Then Kane stirred, shaking his head to clear it. "Status report," he called out. One by one, the team responded. Miraculously, everyone had survived the crash landing. As they gathered outside the shuttle, Johnny got his first look at Novus III. The air was thick and humid, filled with unfamiliar scents. Towering trees with bioluminescent bark stretched towards a sky tinted green by the system's binary stars. In the distance, Johnny could make out the silhouette of jagged mountains. "It's beautiful," he breathed, momentarily forgetting the danger they were in. Kane's voice snapped him back to reality. "It's also crawling with hostiles, both Zarkol and who knows what else. We need to move." As Kane laid out their plan, Johnny studied the reading on his handheld scanner. "The compound we need is produced by a specific fungus. It should grow in areas with high mineral concentrations." Kane nodded. "Then we head for the mountains. Let's move out." Their journey through the alien jungle was fraught with danger. Johnny's expertise proved invaluable as he identified poisonous plants and guided them away from the hunting grounds of vicious predators. When they encountered a field of spore-producing plants, it was Johnny who recognized the danger and fashioned makeshift breathing masks from shuttle debris and local flora. Kane watched the scientist with growing respect. This wasn't the soft academic he'd expected. Reed was resourceful, quick-thinking, and surprisingly tough. As they made camp for the night, huddled under the phosphorescent canopy, Kane approached Johnny. "You've done good out here, Doc. I wouldn't have given us half a chance without you." Johnny nodded, understanding the soldier's unspoken apology for his earlier hostility. "We make a good team, Major. We'll need that to get through this." The next morning, they continued their trek towards the mountains. The terrain grew more treacherous, forcing them to climb steep inclines and cross fast-moving rivers of an odd, gelatinous liquid. It was late afternoon when they finally spotted the research facility nestled in a valley between two peaks. Its sleek architecture stood in stark contrast to the wild beauty of Novus III. "Zarkol," Kane confirmed, lowering his binoculars. "Heavy security. This isn't going to be easy." Johnny studied the facility, his mind racing. "Those towers," he pointed, "they're atmospheric processors. The Zarkol must need them to survive in this environment." Kane raised an eyebrow. "You thinking what I'm thinking, Doc?" Johnny nodded, a plan already forming. "If we can disrupt those processors, it'll create chaos inside the facility. We might just have a chance." As the twin suns of Novus III dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the alien landscape, Johnny and Kane's team prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. The fate of two species hung in the balance, with the key to peace waiting within the walls of the Zarkol facility. Johnny took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "Let's do this." Kane nodded, signaling the team to move out. They crept through the dense undergrowth, using the alien vegetation as cover. As they approached the facility's perimeter, Johnny's eyes locked onto the atmospheric processors. Massive towers of gleaming metal and pulsing energy, they stood as a testament to Zarkol technological prowess. "There," Johnny whispered, pointing to a maintenance hatch near the base of the nearest tower. "That's our way in." Kane motioned for the team's tech specialist, Corporal Zhang, to approach. "Can you crack it?" Zhang examined the alien lock, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Give me 2 minutes." As Zhang worked, Johnny kept his eyes on the facility's main entrance. Guards patrolled in pairs, their elongated forms encased in environment suits. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. A soft beep from Zhang's device broke the tension. The hatch slid open with a hiss of escaping air. "We're in," she announced. The team slipped inside, finding themselves in a narrow maintenance tunnel. The air was thick and acrid, burning Johnny's lungs with each breath. He fumbled with his makeshift mask, adjusting it to filter out more of the alien atmosphere. Kane took point, leading them through a maze of corridors. The walls pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, casting everything in a sickly green glow. As they approached the central control room, the sound of Zarkol voices grew louder. "Ready?" Kane mouthed silently. The team nodded, weapons at the ready. With a swift hand signal, Kane initiated their assault. The room erupted into chaos as the human team burst in, catching the Zarkol technicians off guard. Stun grenades flashed, temporarily blinding the aliens. In the confusion, Johnny raced to the main console. His fingers flew over the alien interface, mind racing to decipher the complex systems. Come on, he muttered. An alarm blared, red lights flashing throughout the facility. Kane's voice cut through the noise. Whatever you're gonna do, Doc, do it fast. Johnny's eyes widened as he found what he was looking for. With a final command, he overrode the atmospheric processor's safety protocols. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Zarkol in the room began to gasp and choke, their environment suits unable to compensate for the sudden change. Kane and his team moved swiftly, securing the incapacitated aliens. We need to move, Johnny urged, already heading for the exit. It won't take long for reinforcements to arrive. They sprinted through the corridors, alarms blaring all around them. As they burst out of the facility, Johnny's eyes locked onto their target, a storage unit near the landing pad. There, he shouted. The compound should be in there. Kane blasted the lock off the storage unit, and Johnny dove inside. His hands shook as he rifled through alien containers, searching for the specific fungal extract Korvac needed. Got it, he exclaimed, clutching a vial of shimmering liquid. The whine of approaching engines filled the air. Kane's face was grim as he surveyed the sky. "Zarkol dropships incoming. We're out of time." As they prepared to make their final stand, a familiar shape appeared on the horizon. The Gorn battlecruiser descended through the atmosphere, its weapons blazing at the incoming Zarkol ships. A transmission crackled through their comms. "Human allies, this is General Slith. Prepare for immediate extraction." Relief washed over Johnny as a Gorn shuttle touched down nearby. They sprinted aboard, the hatch sealing behind them, just as Zarkol troops reached the landing pad. As the shuttle ascended, Johnny clutched the vial of medication tightly. His mind raced with the implications of what had just transpired. A joint human-Gorn operation, successful against the odds. It was more than just a mission. It was a glimpse of what could be. The journey back to Epsilon 9 was a blur of debriefings and medical checks. Johnny barely registered the congratulations and pats on the back. His focus was singular: Korvac. When he finally reached the medical bay, he found her awake and alert. Her scales had regained their luster, and her eyes brightened at the sight of him. "Johnny," she said, her voice stronger than he'd heard in days. "You did it." He smiled, exhaustion and elation warring within him. "We did it, Korvac, all of us, together." As the medication took effect and Korvac's condition improved, word of the mission's success spread through Epsilon 9 like wildfire. Humans and Gorn alike buzzed with excitement, the impossible suddenly seeming possible. Admiral Volkov called an emergency meeting of the station's leadership. As Johnny entered the conference room, he was struck by the mix of species present. Humans and Gorn, sitting side by side, united in purpose. Volkov's voice cut through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a crossroads. The events of the past few days have shown us that cooperation between our species is not only possible, but potentially vital to our survival." He turned to Johnny. "Dr. Reed, your actions have opened a door. Now we must decide whether to step through it." Johnny felt the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders. He thought of Korvac, of the Zarkol threat, of the countless lives lost in a war built on misunderstanding. "Admiral," he began, his voice steady, "I believe we have an opportunity here. An opportunity to end this conflict, to unite against a common enemy, and to forge a future neither of our species could achieve alone." As Johnny spoke, he saw heads nodding, both human and Gorn. The seed of hope planted in the crucible of shared adversity began to take root. Volkov listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Johnny finished, the Admiral stood. "Dr. Reed, I'm appointing you as a key advisor to our diplomatic team. We're going to need your insight as we move forward." A Gorn official, her scales a deep green, spoke up. "The Imperium agrees. This human has shown great courage and wisdom. We would welcome his input in the negotiations to come." As the meeting adjourned, Johnny felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges. But for the first time in years, there was hope. He made his way back to the medical bay, eager to share the news with Korvac. As he entered, he found her in conversation with a tall, battle-scarred Gorn. Johnny recognized him immediately from the mission briefings. General Slith, Korvac's father. Slith turned to Johnny, his reptilian features unreadable. "So, you are the human who saved my daughter." Johnny straightened, meeting the general's gaze. "I did what anyone would have done, sir." Slith's eyes narrowed. "No human. You did what few would have dared. You have given us all much to consider." As Johnny joined their conversation, discussing the potential for peace and the challenges that lay ahead, he couldn't help but feel that they were standing on the precipice of something momentous. The future of both their species hung in the balance, and the next few days would determine whether they could grasp this fragile opportunity for peace. Outside the medical bay, Epsilon 9 hummed with activity. Diplomats and officials from both species began to arrive, preparing for the historic summit that would shape the fate of their each civilizations. The station, once a symbol of division, was transforming into a beacon of hope. But beneath the surface of optimism, shadows lurked. Not everyone welcomed this new era of cooperation. As Johnny and his allies worked to build bridges, Others plotted in darkness, determined to reignite the flames of war. The stage was set for a clash that would determine the future of human-Gorn relations. And at the center of it all stood Johnny Reed, a scientist thrust into the role of peacemaker, carrying the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. As he contemplated the challenges ahead, alarms blared throughout Epsilon 9. The station shuddered and emergency lights flashed. "Zarkol fleet detected," Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel to battle stations." Johnny's heart raced as he exchanged a look with Korvac. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. "We need to move now," Johnny said, helping Korvac to her feet. They rushed out of the medical bay, joining the flow of humans and Gorn hurrying through the corridors. They reached the command center to find it buzzing with activity. Admiral Volkov stood at the central console, his face grim as he surveyed the tactical display. "Report," Volkov barked. "Zarkol fleet approaching fast, sir," Chen responded. "Estimated time to engagement, 15 minutes. Johnny stepped forward. "Admiral, we need to implement our plan immediately. It's risky, but it's our best chance." Volkov nodded. "Do it." Johnny turned to Korvac. "Let's go." They raced to the engineering section, gathering a mixed team of human and Gorn specialists along the way. As they entered the main power control room, Johnny laid out their plan. "We need to reroute power from life support to the experimental FTL comm array," he explained. "It's dangerous, but it's our only shot at calling for reinforcements." The team got to work, fingers flying over control panels as they began the delicate process of power redistribution. Warning lights flashed as life support systems in non-essential areas began to shut down. "We're losing atmosphere in sections 12 through 18, a Gorn engineer reported. Johnny gritted his teeth. "Keep going. We need every ounce of power we can get." As they worked, Johnny's communicator buzzed. It was Major Kane. "Doc, we've got a situation. Colonel Graves and Warlord Kazakh are trying to sabotage our efforts. They're leading a group of extremists to the shuttle bay." Johnny cursed under his breath. "Can you stop them?" "We're in pursuit, but they've got a head start. We could use some help." Johnny looked at Korvac, torn between completing their vital task and confronting the saboteurs. Korvac nodded. "Go, I'll finish here." Johnny squeezed her hand and took off running. He caught up with Kane's security team as they cornered the extremists in a corridor near the shuttle bay. Graves and Kazakh stood at the front of their group, weapons drawn. "Stand aside," Graves snarled. "We won't let you doom our species to servitude under the Gorn." "You're making a mistake," Johnny said, stepping forward with his hands raised. "The Zarkol are the real threat. If we don't stand together now, both our species will fall." Kazakh's scales rippled with anger. "Pretty words from a human sympathizer. We've seen the evidence of your collusion." "Evidence planted by the Zarkol?" Johnny countered. He pulled out a data pad displaying the results of his investigation. "Look at this, the communication logs, the forged orders. It all leads back to Zarkol infiltrators." Doubt flickered across Graves's face. "How do we know this isn't another trick?" A distant explosion rocked the station. Kane's voice cut through the tension. "We don't have time for this. The Zarkol are attacking. Every second we waste here puts more lives at risk." Johnny locked eyes with Graves. "Colonel, I know you want to protect humanity, but right now, the best way to do that is to work with the Gorn. We need your tactical expertise, your knowledge of our capabilities. Help us fight the real enemy." For a long moment, silence reigned. Then slowly, Graves lowered his weapon. "Fine, but this doesn't mean I trust you or the Gorn." Kazakh hesitated, then followed suit. "We will fight, but watch yourselves, humans." As the group made their way back to the command center, Johnny's communicator buzzed again. It was Korvac. "Johnny, we've done it. The FTL comm array is online, but we've had to evacuate large sections of the station. Dr. Reyes is coordinating emergency shelters in the secure areas." "Good work," Johnny replied. "We're on our way back with Graves and Kazakh. They've agreed to help." They entered the command center to find Admiral Volkov and General Slith directing the station's defenses. A holographic display showed the approaching Zarkol fleet, vastly outnumbering the combined human-Gorn forces. "Status report," Volkov demanded. Lieutenant Chen responded, her fingers dancing over her console. "Our fleet is in position, Admiral. Mixed squadrons are ready for deployment. Station shields are at maximum, but they won't hold for long under sustained bombardment." Johnny joined Korvac at the communications array. "Let's hope this works," he muttered, as they began transmitting their distress call. Outside, the battle began in earnest. Human and Gorn ships moved in perfect synchronization, their complementary tactics catching the Zarkal off guard. Fighter squadrons wove intricate patterns through space, human pilots' intuitive flying style meshing seamlessly with Gorn precision. On the station, Johnny and Korvac worked feverishly, coordinating with the fleet and analyzing Zarkal attack patterns. Their combined knowledge proved invaluable, allowing the defenders to anticipate and counter enemy maneuvers. "Incoming!" Chen shouted as a barrage of Zarkal weapons fire slammed into the station's shields. Epsilon 9 shuddered, and warning klaxons blared. "Shields down to 60%, a Gorn technician reported. "We cannot sustain this level of assault for long." Just as despair began to set in, the FTL comm array crackled to life. A voice, distorted but clear, came through. "This is Admiral Zhang of the Earth Fleet. We've received your distress call and are en route with Gorn reinforcements. Hold on, Epsilon 9. Help is coming." A cheer went up in the command center. Johnny felt a surge of hope, but he knew they weren't out of danger yet. "Multiple Zarkal ships breaking through our lines," Chen called out. "They're on a direct course for the station." Johnny watched in horror as the enemy vessels launched a barrage of strange, pulsating projectiles. They struck Epsilon 9 with terrifying force, tearing through weakened shields and ripping into the station's hull. "Massive structural damage in sections 3 through 7, a human engineer reported, her voice tight with fear. "We're losing integrity fast." Admiral Volkov's face was grim as he made the call. "Begin emergency evacuation procedures. Get everyone to the escape pods and shuttles." As the order went out, chaos erupted throughout the station. Johnny and Korvac found themselves swept up in the tide of panicking crew members and delegates. They fought their way through the crowds, helping direct people to safety. "This way," Johnny shouted, guiding a group of injured crew members towards an evacuation point. He and Korvac worked tirelessly, risking their lives as explosions rocked the station and debris rained down around them. Just as they cleared another section, Johnny's blood ran cold. The main evacuation route was blocked by a massive piece of fallen debris. Hundreds of people were trapped, with no way out. "We need to clear this," Korvac said, her voice strained. "But the automated systems are down. Someone will have to stay behind and operate the manual override." Johnny looked at the desperate faces around him, then at Korvac. He made his decision in an instant. "Get everyone to the escape pods," he told her. "I'll stay and clear the path." Korvac's eyes widened. "Johnny, no, it's too dangerous." He squeezed her hand. "There's no other way. Go, save as many as you can. I'll be right behind you." As Korvac reluctantly led the others away, Johnny turned to face the blocked passage. He knew the odds of survival were slim, but he had to try. With trembling hands, he began to work the manual override, praying that he could clear the way before it was too late. Outside, the battle raged on. The fate of Epsilon 9 and the fragile alliance it represented hung by a thread. As Johnny worked desperately to save the lives of those trapped on the station, he could only hope that their efforts had been enough, that the united stand of humans and Gorn would be enough to turn the tide against the Zarkal threat. Johnny's hands flew over the manual override controls, sweat beading on his brow as he fought to clear the debris blocking the evacuation route. The station groaned and shuddered around him, each tremor a reminder of the precarious situation they were in. Come on," he muttered, willing the machinery to work faster. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Johnny!" He turned to see Korvac pushing her way through the crowd, her scales gleaming under the emergency lights. "What are you doing here?" Johnny shouted over the din. "You need to evacuate." Korvac's eyes flashed with tenacity. "I'm not leaving you behind. We do this together." Before Johnny could protest, she was at his side, her clawed hands joining his on the controls. Together, they worked in perfect synchronization, their combined strength and knowledge accelerating the process. With a grinding screech, the debris began to shift. Cheers erupted from the trapped crowd as a path finally cleared. "Go!" Johnny yelled, gesturing wildly. "Get to the escape pods!" The mass of humans and Gorn surged forward, pouring through the newly opened passage. Johnny and Korvac stood to the side, guiding the evacuation and ensuring no one was left behind. As the last stragglers made their way through, a violent tremor rocked the station. Johnny stumbled, nearly falling, but Korvac's strong arm steadied him. "That's everyone," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to go." They turned to follow the evacuees, but fate had other plans. With a deafening crack, the ceiling above them gave way. Johnny acted on pure instinct, shoving Korvac forward just as a massive chunk of debris came crashing down. When the dust settled, they found themselves trapped on the wrong side of a new, impenetrable barrier. "No!" Korvac slammed her fists against the debris, but it didn't budge. Johnny's mind raced, assessing their options. "The control room," he said suddenly. "We might be able to access emergency systems from there." They sprinted through the failing station, dodging falling debris and leaping over ruptured conduits. The control room door was jammed, but their combined strength forced it open. Inside, Johnny immediately went to work, his fingers dancing over the consoles. Korvac stood watch, her keen eyes scanning for any sign of further danger. "I've got it," Johnny announced after several tense minutes. "Emergency life support is online. It's not much, but it'll buy us some time." Korvac nodded, then froze, her head tilted as if listening. "Johnny," she said slowly, "do you hear that?" He paused, straining his ears. A low, ominous hum was building, barely perceptible but growing stronger by the second. "The reactor," they said in unison, their eyes meeting in shared horror. Johnny's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up schematics and readouts. His face paled as he took in the information. "It's going critical," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If it blows, it'll take out not just the station, but both fleets as well." Korvac's scales rippled with tension. "Can we stop it?" Johnny ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Maybe, but it's going to be dangerous as hell." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. Then slowly Korvac reached out and took Johnny's hand in hers. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "I'm glad we're facing it together." Johnny squeezed her hand, feeling the smooth scales against his skin. In that moment, all the barriers between them, species, culture, the years of conflict, seemed to melt away. "Together," he agreed. They set to work, their movements a carefully choreographed dance as they fought to stabilize the reactor. Johnny's expertise in human technology complemented Korvac's knowledge of Gorn systems, allowing them to make progress where either alone would have failed. Outside, the battle raged on. Through the station's sensors, they caught glimpses of the conflict, human and Gorn ships flying in formation, their attacks coordinated with a precision that would have been unthinkable just days ago. As they worked, Johnny established a comlink with the Allied fleet. "Epsilon 9 to Allied Command," he called out. "We're still here, and we've got intel on Zarkol weaknesses." Admiral Volkov's voice crackled through the speakers. "Reed, we thought you'd evacuated. What's your situation?" Johnny quickly explained their predicament in the reactor crisis. "We're doing what we can here, but we could use some help keeping the Zarkol off our backs." "Understood," Volkov replied. "We'll tighten the defensive perimeter around the station. Just focus on stopping that reactor meltdown." As if on cue, the station shuddered under a barrage of Zarkol fire. Alarms blared as new warnings flashed across the screens. "Hull breach in a Section 4, Korvac called out, her claws flying over the controls. "Rerouting power to emergency force fields." Johnny nodded, not looking up from his own work. "Good. Keep an eye on the radiation levels. They're spiking in the lower decks." They continued like this for what felt like hours, each new crisis threatening to overwhelm them. The air grew thick and acrid, their lungs burning with every breath. Just as they thought they might have the reactor under control, A massive impact rocked the station. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and a support beam came crashing down, narrowly missing them. "What was that?" Johnny coughed, waving away the smoke. Korvac's eyes widened as she checked the sensors. "A Zarkol command ship. It's on a collision course with the station." They watched in horror as the massive vessel bore down on them, its intention clear, to destroy Epsilon 9 and the alliance it represented in one final, desperate act. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, a small fighter appeared on their screens. It streaked towards the command ship, its trajectory a perfect intercept course. "That's Major Kane," Korvac exclaimed, recognizing the pilot's signature maneuvers. They watched, hearts in their throats, as Kane's fighter slammed into the Zarkol ship. The impact threw the larger vessel off course, saving the station, but at a terrible cost. "Kane," Johnny whispered, his voice thick with emotion. There was no time to mourn, however. The reactor was entering its final stages, and they were running out of options. "We need to get closer," Johnny said, his face set with iron will. "The controls here aren't enough. We need to manually adjust the coolant flow." Korvac nodded, understanding the risk. "Lead the way." They made their way through the crumbling station, each step bringing them closer to the deadly radiation of the unstable reactor. Johnny's skin prickled with unease as they entered the reactor chamber, the Geiger counter on his wrist screaming a warning. "Here," he said, pointing to a massive control panel, "we need to reroute the coolant through these secondary channels. It's our only shot at preventing a meltdown." As they worked, a new voice joined them over the comms. "Johnny, Korvac? This is Dr. Reyes. I'm still on board, coordinating the last of the medical evacuations. What's your status?" "Elena," Johnny replied, surprised. "We're in the reactor chamber, trying to prevent a meltdown. It's not looking good." "I'm on my way," Elena said without hesitation. "No!" Johnny and Korvac shouted in unison, but it was too late. The connection had already cut out. Minutes later, Elena burst into the chamber, medical kit in hand. "I thought you might need some help," she said, immediately assessing their condition. With Elena's assistance, they were able to work faster, her medical expertise helping them push through the increasing effects of radiation exposure. The reactor's hum grew to a deafening roar as they fought to bring it under control. Sweat poured down their faces, their bodies pushed to the limit. "Almost there," Johnny grunted, his vision beginning to blur. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the station. Alarms blared as the outer hull was breached, the vacuum of space threatening to suck them out. "Hold on!" Korvac shouted. With incredible speed and strength, she grabbed Johnny and Elena, anchoring them to the station's structure. As debris flew past them and the air thinned, Johnny made a final, desperate lunge for the controls. His fingers found the right sequence, and he pushed through the pain to enter the final command. The reactor's roar began to subside, the readings on the monitors slowly returning to safe levels. They had done it. The meltdown was averted. But the cost had been high. As the immediate danger passed, Johnny felt his strength leave him. He collapsed to the ground, his body racked with pain. "Johnny!" Korvac cried out, rushing to his side. Elena was there in an instant, her medical training kicking in as she assessed his condition. "Severe radiation exposure," Elena muttered, her face grim. "We need to get him to a medical bay immediately." As Johnny's consciousness faded, he was vaguely aware of Korvac's strong arms lifting him, of Elena's steady voice guiding them through the failing station. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was the triumphant cheers coming through the comm system. The Zarkol were retreating, their fleet broken by the unified strength of humans and Gorn. In the space around Epsilon 9, rescue ships from both species raced towards the station, united in their desperate hope to save those who had sacrificed so much for their newfound alliance. As Johnny's consciousness faded, the last threads of his awareness clung to the sensation of Korvac's strong arms and Elena's steady voice guiding them through the chaos. The next thing Johnny knew, he was enveloped in a cocoon of warmth and light. His eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on his surroundings. He was inside some sort of chamber, its walls pulsing with a soft, bioluminescent glow. Through the translucent material, he could make out blurry figures moving about. "He's awake!" a muffled voice called out. The chamber began to open with a gentle hiss, and Johnny found himself blinking in the bright lights of a medical bay, unlike any he had ever seen. Dr. Elena Reyes leaned over him, her face a mixture of relief and professional concern. "Welcome back, Johnny. How do you feel?" Johnny tried to speak, but his throat was dry and raw. Elena quickly offered him a sip of water through a straw. After a moment, he managed to croak out, "Like I've been hit by a Zarkol warship. What happened?" "You've been in treatment for severe radiation exposure," Elena explained, her eyes flicking to the monitors surrounding Johnny's bed. "We're on board the Celestial Mercy, a joint human-Gorn medical frigate. You've been unconscious for nearly 2 weeks." As Johnny's vision cleared, he became aware of the unique nature of his surroundings. Human and Gorn medical equipment stood side by side, seamlessly integrated. A Gorn physician conferred with a human nurse in the corner, their interaction marked by an easy familiarity that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "Korvac?" Johnny asked, suddenly remembering his last moments on Epsilon 9. "I'm here," came a familiar voice. Korvac stepped into view, her scales shimmering under the medical bay's lights. She looked tired but unharmed, her eyes fixed on Johnny with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You stayed," Johnny said softly. Korvac nodded, her hand hesitating for a moment before gently resting on Johnny's arm. "Of course I stayed. We're in this together, remember?" Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Volkov and a towering Gorn that Johnny recognized as General Slith. The two stood side by side, their postures mirroring each other in a way that spoke volumes about the changes that had occurred. "Lieutenant Reed," Volkov began, his usual gruff demeanor softened by a hint of genuine concern. "It's good to see you awake. Your actions on Epsilon 9 saved countless lives and cemented our alliance with the Gorn." General Sleeth nodded, his reptilian features arranged in what Johnny was beginning to recognize as a Gorn smile. "Your bravery has not gone unnoticed, human. Songs of your deeds are already being sung in the hatcheries of my homeworld." As Johnny absorbed this information, Elena stepped forward, her face serious. "Admiral, General, I need to brief you on Lieutenant Reed's condition. The treatment he's undergone, it's had some unexpected effects." Johnny felt a flutter of panic in his chest. "What kind of effects?" Elena took a deep breath. "The combination of your human DNA and the advanced Gorn healing techniques we used, it's caused changes at a cellular level. Your body is adapting in ways we've never seen before." The room fell silent as the implications of Elena's words sank in. Johnny looked down at his hands, half expecting to see scales or claws. They looked normal, but he could feel something different, a new energy thrumming just beneath his skin. "Is it dangerous?" Korvac asked, her voice tight with concern. Elena shook her head. "Not as far as we can tell. In fact, initial tests suggest these changes might lead to increased resilience, faster healing, possibly even enhanced physical capabilities. But we're in uncharted territory here. We'll need to monitor Johnny closely and conduct further tests." Admiral Volkov's brow furrowed. "This development could have far-reaching implications for our alliance. The medical and scientific communities will want to study this extensively." "With all due respect, Admiral," Johnny interjected, finding his voice, "I'm not a lab rat. I want to get back out there to help solidify this alliance we've fought so hard for." General Slith clicked his approval. "The human speaks with warrior spirit. Perhaps he could assist Major Kane in training our new joint combat units." "Kane's alive?" Johnny asked, relief flooding through him. Volkov nodded. "Barely. That crazy stunt he pulled saved Epsilon 9 and turned the tide of the battle. He's recovering and has already started working on integrating our combat tactics." As they discussed the possibilities, a commotion outside the medical bay caught their attention. Through the windows, they could see a group of protesters, a mix of humans and Gorn, holding signs with slogans like, "Keep humanity pure," and "Gorn strength, Gorn alone." "Not everyone is happy about our new alliance," Korvac said softly, her eyes fixed on the scene outside. Admiral Volkov's face hardened. "We've had to deal with extremist elements on both sides. There was even an attempt to sabotage this medical station, but our joint security teams handled it. Johnny watched the protesters, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. After everything we've been through, how can they still cling to old hatreds? Change is never easy, General Slith rumbled. But we must not let the voices of a few drown out the will of the many. Our alliance has already accomplished great things, and there is much more to be done. As if to underscore his point, a group of human and Gorn medical staff walked by, engrossed in a passionate discussion about the implications of Johnny's treatment. Their eyes shone with the excitement of new discovery, the thrill of crossing boundaries that had once seemed insurmountable. Johnny felt a surge of determination. Whatever changes he was going through, whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that the path forward was one of unity. He looked at Korvac, saw the same determination mirrored in her eyes, and knew that together they would face whatever came next. "When can I start?" Johnny asked, already trying to sit up. Elena gently pushed him back down. "Not so fast, you still need time to recover and adjust. But soon, Johnny, soon you'll be at the forefront of this new era." As the others filed out, discussing plans for the upcoming ceremony to celebrate the alliance, Korvac lingered behind. She waited until they were alone before speaking. "Johnny," she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "there's something we need to talk about." Johnny reached out, taking her clawed hand in his. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." Korvac's scales rippled with emotion as she squeezed his hand. Outside, the stars streaked by as the celestial mercy continued its journey, carrying them towards an uncertain but hopeful future. As Johnny and Korvac's hands intertwined, a comfortable silence fell between them. The hum of the medical equipment and the distant chatter of the medical staff faded into the background. Johnny's mind raced with questions about the changes he was experiencing. But for now, he was content to simply exist in this moment with Korvac. Their peaceful interlude was interrupted by a gentle knock on the door. Dr. Reyes entered, her face a mask of professional concern tinged with excitement. "Johnny, how are you feeling?" she asked, moving to check the various monitors surrounding his bed. "Better, I think," Johnny replied, his voice stronger than before. "Everything feels different, sharper somehow." Dr. Reyes nodded, her eyes scanning the readouts. "Your vital signs are stabilizing at a remarkable rate. We're seeing cellular regeneration unlike anything we've encountered before. It's quite extraordinary." As she spoke, Johnny became acutely aware of subtle changes in his perception. The soft glow of the medical equipment seemed more vibrant, the gentle hiss of the air recyclers more distinct. He flexed his fingers, marveling at the newfound strength he felt coursing through his body. "What does this mean for me, Doc?" Johnny asked, a hint of apprehension in his voice. Dr. Reyes's expression softened. "Honestly, Johnny, we're in uncharted territory here. But from what we can tell, your body is adapting in ways that could revolutionize our understanding of human physiology. Your recovery rate alone is unprecedented." Korvac squeezed Johnny's hand reassuringly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The days that followed were a whirlwind of tests, examinations, and hushed conversations between medical staff. Johnny's strength returned rapidly, surprising even the most optimistic among his care team. As the grand ceremony to celebrate the Human-Gorn Alliance approached, anticipation built throughout the medical station. On the morning of the ceremony, Johnny awoke feeling more alive than he had in weeks. The room was bathed in the soft light of a simulated dawn, and Korvac was dozing in a chair by his bedside. As he stirred, her eyes snapped open, immediately alert. "Johnny," she said, leaning forward, "how do you feel?" He took a moment to assess himself, marveling at the absence of pain and fatigue. "I feel incredible," he replied, his voice filled with wonder. Dr. Reyes entered the room, her face breaking into a wide smile as she saw Johnny sitting up. "Well, look at you. Ready to face the day?" Johnny nodded, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "More than ready, Doc. What's the plan?" As Dr. Reyes outlined the day's events, Johnny became aware of a growing commotion outside his room. The medical station was coming alive with activity as delegates from both species arrived for the ceremony. Through the windows, he could see a mix of human and Gorn security personnel patrolling the corridors, led by a familiar face. "Is that Kane?" Johnny asked, gesturing to the window. Korvac nodded. "Major Kane has been overseeing the joint security team. He's taken to it like a gorn to water." With Dr. Reyes's approval, Johnny began to prepare for the ceremony. As he dressed in a freshly pressed uniform, he caught sight of his reflection in a mirror. His appearance hadn't changed dramatically, but there was a new vitality in his eyes, a subtle shift in his bearing that hinted at the changes within. The main auditorium was packed with dignitaries from both species when Johnny arrived, supported by Korvac and Dr. Reyes. As they entered, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by a surge of applause that quickly grew into a standing ovation. Johnny felt a swell of emotion as he looked out over the sea of faces, human and Gorn alike, united in their recognition of what had been achieved. Admiral Volkov and General Sleeth stood side by side at the podium, their contrasting forms a powerful symbol of the new alliance. As Johnny approached to receive his Medal of Valor, he could see the pride and respect in their eyes. "Lieutenant John Reed," Admiral Volkov began, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium, "your actions on Epsilon 9 exemplify the highest ideals of courage, sacrifice, and unity. It is my honor to present you with this Medal of Valor on behalf of both humanity and the Gorn Imperium." As the cool metal touched his chest, Johnny felt the weight of responsibility it carried. He stepped up to the podium, looking out over the assembled crowd. Words he hadn't planned began to flow, born from a new understanding that bridged both human and Gorn perspectives. "Today we stand at the threshold of a new era," Johnny began, his voice strong and clear. "An era where the lines that once divided us have been erased, replaced by bonds of friendship, respect, and shared purpose. What we've achieved here is more than an alliance between species. It's a testament to the power of compassion, to the strength we find when we choose understanding over fear." As he spoke, Johnny could feel the energy in the room shifting. Humans and Gorn alike leaned forward, captivated by words that seemed to resonate on a level beyond mere language. He spoke of the challenges they had overcome, the sacrifices made on both sides, and the endless possibilities that lay before them. "Together," Johnny concluded, his gaze sweeping across the auditorium, "we have the power to forge a future brighter than either of our species could have imagined alone. Let this alliance be just the beginning of our shared journey." The applause that followed was deafening, a cacophony of human cheers and Gorn clicks of approval. As Johnny stepped down from the podium, he caught Korvac's eye. The look they shared spoke volumes about the path that lay ahead of them. In the days that followed the ceremony, Johnny's enhanced abilities became increasingly apparent. His strength and agility surpassed human norms, while his capacity for processing complex information left even the Gorn scientists impressed. More striking, however, was his ability to bridge the gap between human and Gorn perspectives, offering insights that neither species alone could have reached. This unique combination of skills made Johnny an ideal candidate to lead a new joint scientific initiative. The project, aimed at exploring the potential benefits of human-Gorn biological integration, quickly became a cornerstone of the Alliance's research efforts. As news of Johnny's transformation spread, it sparked a shift in public opinion. Those who had been skeptical of the Alliance began to see the potential for positive change. Educational programs sprang up across both human and Gorn worlds, with Johnny and Korvac often featured as guest lecturers. Months passed, and the Alliance grew stronger with each passing day. Standing on the observation deck of a newly constructed joint human-Gorn space station, Johnny and Korvac watched as ships from both species worked in perfect harmony to dismantle the last known Zarkol stronghold. "It's really happening," Johnny murmured, his enhanced vision picking out individual ships in the distant formation. Korvac nodded, her scales shimmering in the starlight. "We've come so far, so quickly. Sometimes I can hardly believe it." As the final Zarkol structure crumbled, cheers erupted across the station. Johnny turned to Korvac, taking her hand in his. Their eyes met, and in that moment they both felt the profound connection that had brought them to this point. The view screen behind them flickered to life, showing scenes of celebration erupting on both human and Gorn worlds. Centuries of conflict were giving way to a united future, one that Johnny and Korvac had helped to shape. "Lieutenant Reed, Major Korvac," a voice called out. They turned to see Admiral Volkov approaching, accompanied by General Slith. "We have a proposition for you both." Johnny and Korvac exchanged a curious glance before giving the officers their full attention. "We're establishing a new joint colony world," General Slith explained, his voice filled with pride. "A symbol of our alliance and a testament to what we can achieve together." Admiral Volkov nodded, a rare smile on his face. "We'd like you to be the ones to plant the first seeds. It seems fitting, given your role in bringing our peoples together." As Johnny and Korvac followed the officers to the shuttle bay, they felt the weight of history on their shoulders. Their journey, which had begun with a chance encounter between an injured Gorn and a compassionate human, had grown into something neither could have imagined. The shuttle ride to the new colony world was filled with a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the future they were helping to create. As they approached the planet's surface, Johnny marveled at the pristine landscape below, a canvas waiting to be painted with the combined efforts of humans and Gorn. They touched down in a clearing that had been prepared for the ceremony. A small crowd of human and Gorn colonists waited, their faces eager and hopeful. At the center of the clearing stood a simple pedestal, upon which rested an activation panel. Hand in hand, Johnny and Korvac approached the pedestal. They shared a long look, volumes passing between them without a word spoken. Then together, they pressed the activation button. The ground beneath their feet hummed with energy as hidden systems sprang to life. Before their eyes, a lush garden began to emerge from the soil, blending flora from both their homeworlds in a stunning display of color and life. As the newly planted garden flourished around them, Johnny and Korvac stood in awe of what they had helped create. The setting sun painted the sky in a riot of colors, casting long shadows across the landscape. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of their shared creation, Johnny and Korvac knew that this was just the beginning. The garden would grow and thrive, just as the alliance between their peoples would continue to flourish and evolve. As the first stars began to appear in the deepening twilight, Johnny turned to Korvac, his enhanced senses drinking in every detail of her face. "What do you think happens next?" he asked softly. Korvac's scales rippled with emotion as she gazed out over the new world, stretching before them. "I don't know," she replied, her voice filled with wonder and hope. "But whatever it is, we'll face it together." Hand in hand, they stood at the edge of the garden, their silhouettes merging against the colorful sky. The once bitter enemies had become inseparable allies, their futures now intertwined in ways neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed. As night fell on the new colony world, Johnny and Korvac remained, watchful guardians of the new era they had helped to create.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.